It's great to be here in Auckland, and I have to say, I have reached that point. I'm shocked, actually, to say where you put like 25-year veteran in your bio, and you put that because you don't really want to put the real number because it's bigger than that, and you don't want people to think you're an old fogey. So, but I've been covering the IT industry and doing consulting and analysis since 1980. And so I've seen a few things around, although one thing I've never seen before this trip was New Zealand and Auckland. So I'm really excited. This is my first visit here to New Zealand. I can add another push pin into my map of countries visited. And as Robin was mentioning, my job at IDC is to work with our over 1,000 analysts who are around the world looking at all sorts of little cubby holes of IT. You know, servers and software and telecom networks and IT services and BPO and you name it. And of course, CIO practices, IT organization, best practices, and to help our analysts see the big picture, see the broad picture. So what I'll share with you today is just a little bit of the perspective that I developed from working with my colleagues about where is this industry that we are a part of and we depend on so much, where is the industry going over the next several years, and what does that mean for us and our decision-making here in 2012. One side job I have is I'm Dr. Cloud, if you will, for IDC. So since 2008, I've been leading our global cloud research initiative. So I'm going to talk a little bit about cloud, but I'm not going to focus totally on cloud because to me, CIOs, yes, cloud is a very important part of what you're going to need to master to be successful over the next several years and beyond, but it's certainly not the big picture. And so what I'll share with you really is our view of what is that bigger picture for CIOs and your organizations in getting the most out of IT. So one other thing I'd say about my job that's really fantastic is I do get to talk to lots of CIOs around the world. So just in the last 6 months, I've been with CIOs in Saudi Arabia, and then in Cape Town at our IDC African CIO Summit. We had CIOs from 11 different African countries there. I was speaking at our CIO event in Moscow just a couple of months ago. I was in Tokyo last month, so you get the idea. 2 weeks ago, I was hosting IDC's Cloud Leadership Forum, so we had about 300 or 400 CIOs in the U.S. talking just about cloud. And so part of what I'll be sharing with you are some of the insights that are very fresh from what your fellow CIOs in these different parts of the world are thinking, again, about cloud and about other developments in IT. So, with that little preamble, you'll notice the title of my talk is Competing for 2020. And I know some people, particularly with an economy, global economy that's still sputtering and struggling to recover, say, well, that's fairly presumptuous, isn't it? We're just trying to survive, in 2012 and hopefully get to 2013 in decent shape. Why do we care at all about 2020? And the reason is that we believe that if you look at the IT industry and, of course, the companies that use IT in 2012, that we're in the middle of a pretty radical change in the IT that's available to us, in what we do with that IT, and how we generate value out of that IT. And so our frame of reference when we think about this is that we're at the beginning of a once every 20 to 25 year platform change, a set of technologies that together are forming a foundation of lots of new things that we can do with IT for our enterprises we haven't been able to do before. And the last time we were in this position, I was actually there. And it was the mid-1980s. And some of you, I'm sure, were there as well. And some of you were perhaps in elementary school at that time. But at the time, we were at the beginning of another transition, the transition from what we'd call a first platform, kind of the mainframe and terminal era, to what we call the second platform. And that second platform was really built around a set of new technologies that all happen to come together at the same time. So if you think about it, the PC was coming in early 1980s. We had Ethernet technology, which of course has become pervasive. TCP/IP was really getting up and off the ground. We had relational databases coming in and basically taking over the world of data management from the traditional hierarchical databases. And of course, we had client-server application architectures that took advantage of this new platform. And what's interesting is that if you look at our data centers today, right in 2012, and you look at probably 80 or 90% of the things that generate value for our companies, those business systems, those databases, probably 80 or 90% of it is built on that second platform, the stuff that came in that late 80s, mid to late 80s. And it's funny, if you think about it, at the time, people were quite skeptical about these technologies. They were saying, well, a PC, that's, it's kind of a toy, it's not real technology. Or some people would play the economic argument. They'd say, well, if you actually look at the total MIPS and the cost of managing PC MIPS, actually mainframes are a lot less expensive per MIPS than PCs. Or they'd say, well, they're not secure enough. We can't, people, we don't know what people are going to do with this stuff. It's hard to control, it's hard to manage. Does it sound familiar at all, by the way? When you think about smartphones and tablets or think about cloud computing, we can't secure that, or we can't manage it, or it's really much more expensive. And yet you look now, it became the mainstream. It's what most of what we do is built on. So we're arguing that the last 30 years of innovation, 20 to 30 years of innovation within all industries has been built on that second technology platform. So where are we now? Okay, cut to the chase. We're at the beginning of the emergence of a new set of technologies that form a third platform. So I don't think this is going to surprise anybody. This has become the mantra, I think, of most conferences and most CIO discussions now when you think about, well, what are the interesting new technologies that are going to be key for our future? Cloud, mobile, social, big data. And you can just say that over and over. Cloud, mobile, social, big data. That's everywhere you look. That's what people are recognizing as really the next disruptive set of technologies. And the reason I said I'm not going to focus solely on cloud is because I think what's important from a CIO perspective is to understand that cloud is not just about cloud. Cloud is about, about a back end that you need to deliver services to a mobile front end. It's about a compute and storage engine that underlies the capabilities that you can do with big data and the analytics that ride on that. And of course, they're at the heart of social technologies as well. So all of these things are interconnected. And so that our argument is the next 15, 20, 25 years of growth and innovation, not just for the vendors here who are trying to sell all this stuff, but really for your own companies who are trying to use technology to create advantage in your industry, that they're going to be based on this third platform. So for us, the third platform is really the core of the CIO's or strategic vision in our view. As you look in 2012, what do we need to do? What do we need to learn about these technologies? How do we need to mix them together? How do we need to change the way that we manage technology? What do we do about skills? How do we change our relationship with our business executives so they can sit on top of and take advantage of this new platform? That this is, in fact, the platform on which your strategic decisions in 2012 all rest. Right? So you're going to make a lot of decisions in 2012 that have nothing to do with any of these new technology platforms, and I'm sure a lot of them will be important. But there's no question, the decisions you make in 2012 that involve this third platform will be ones that will either set you up for success or set you up for failure for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And so that's why I feel, we're talking about your companies competing for leadership in your own industries in 2020 and beyond. They're going to have to depend on the decisions you make about the third platform right here in 2012 and 2013. So that's the focus that I'm going to give in the next few minutes, is what are those decisions that need to be made when we step ahead into the future and look back and say, well, some people made smart decisions, some people made terrible decisions. What were the type of decisions that turned out to be the critical ones? So we'll focus on that. One last thing I'll just say about this is, if we look back at the history of that jump from the first platform to the second platform in the mid-'80s, late '80s, there's a bit of history that I think is very important for us and very instructive. There were some IT vendors that were, big honchos in IT in that first platform. And when they approached the second platform, some made really good decisions, and some made really bad decisions. So there was sort of a strategic crossroads that the industry faced as this new platform of technologies came in. And the ones, of course, who didn't make it, we all know their names, right? So digital, DEC, remember them? Wang. And the software side, Cullinet. The list goes on and on. These were the titans of their time. And yet, if you look at Wang, if you look at how they failed and why they failed, most of it was because they weren't able to make the changes necessary to take advantage of this next platform of growth. And so the reason that's relevant to us, of course, is the vendors who are sitting here in the room and who are out in the exhibition hall, they're now facing this second platform to third platform crossroads. So it's a very important time to look closely at them and be thinking, are they asking the right questions? Are they making the right decisions about their own offerings, product and service offerings? And are they setting themselves up for success for the next 20 years? Or are they going to be it's funny, I was giving this talk, or a version of this talk, in Copenhagen a few months ago. And I was talking about the history of these vendors who went the wrong way at the crossroads. And a guy who was in the audience, he was 38 years old. He was an executive in a mobile software company. He said, Frank, he came up after, he said, Frank, thanks very much for that little bit of history about the IT industry, which of course made me feel very old to begin with. But then he said, that company, Wang, I'd never heard of them. And I thought to myself, that's unbelievable. And he said, but while you were talking, I went online and went to Wikipedia, and I found them. And they were really a big deal. And I realized at that time we've got a great name for companies that make the wrong decision at this type of platform jump. You don't just fail. You don't just go out of business. You become wicked trivia. Right? So I think this is, some in the hall are going to become wicked trivia, right? And I think one other point I'll make to you, and this will come through, I hope, very clearly in my comments, is wicked trivia is not just about the IT vendors. It's also about you and your own companies. Because there were CIOs in the mid-'80s and late '80s who were very retro in their view about the new platform and decided they were going to be in the Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm mode, they were going to be the late majority, or maybe even laggards. And they helped cripple their companies in their ability to innovate on the new platform. So I think that's the other thing that's at stake here, is it's not just the vendors who are going to have to transition to this third platform, it's also you and the business executives who count on you to help them innovate. So let's talk a little bit about that. When we look back, as I said, look back, say 10 years, 20 years from now, and say, well, who got it? Who succeeded on this third platform? And let's forget the vendors for a moment. Let's think about you. So which CIOs really took advantage of this new platform for innovation? I think of, at least three main areas where the critical successes or failures are going to be made in terms of decision making. The first is about urgency. And so we'll talk about that. Some CIOs will have understood the pace at which the new platform is coming in, and some will have missed the urgency. So we'll talk a little bit about, how quickly is this third platform coming in? How quickly do you actually need to move to it? The second is really a group of factors and really about competencies. Right? And to me, I think three competencies that will define the difference between the second platform world for CIOs and the third platform are around CIOs who can cope with a massive new scale. Third platform brings an incredible scale, and scale along multiple dimensions. We'll talk about that, about time and number of users and devices and costs and so forth. The scale's totally changing. Community is another competency. In the third platform world, to think about platform, the third platform, unlike the second platform, really is a platform. Because it's online, largely online, and it's services-based, there's going to be a lot of leverage of other people's talents and capabilities that will help expand your own capabilities and magnify your own capabilities on top of this third platform. So if you're really good at community and leveraging it, you're going to be successful. If that's not something you know how to do, it's going to be a real deficit. And we'll talk about, how do you play community in the third platform. And then the third competency is really about context. And I think this is something all of us will recognize. We've talked about the need to reach up into the context of business value with IT. CIOs I've known for 30 years have been talking about this, but it's always, you kind of get buried under the realities of day-to-day keeping the lights on. And I think what's going to happen with the third platform is we're going to see amazing opportunities to really make that leap into a high-value, high enterprise value context. So we'll talk a little bit about, well, how do you do that? And how are some other companies doing it today? And then the last area is just really about competition. Who are the players going to be? Because one thing you see whenever you see a platform change, you look around you, the left and the right, and you realize after a few years, the players have changed. There's some of the traditional players that you've counted on, either as suppliers or even in your own industry as competitors, are still there. They've made the jump with you to this new environment, but other of the traditional ones have gone. And then there are new players that have come in that you would never have recognized. You may have never considered as suppliers before, or you may never have seen as competitors to your own business. So we'll talk a little bit about who we see as the players in this next era of the third platform. So to me, that's going to be key. One area of, all right, so let's focus actually now on urgency. And this is really about pace. How quickly is this new platform of technologies coming in? I know when I've talked about cloud since 2008, and you can imagine, I've met a few skeptical CIOs in my time, and some vendors who say, well, all this cloud. We did this 40 years ago with time-sharing systems. This is nothing new. And now what's interesting is we're seeing a little bit more of a sense of, hype dissipating and reality coming up. And so as we talk about urgency and the pace, I want to just show this gentleman here. Does anyone know who this is? This is the, you could say, science fiction writer William Gibson. And he's a pretty talented writer, but he has a quote that I always keep pinned up on my wall right next to my desk in my office when I'm thinking about, well, how can we predict what's going to happen in the future? Because that's, of course, a key part of what we do at IDC. And his quote is absolutely beautiful. He says, the future has already arrived. It's just unevenly distributed. So, and I think if you think about that, and what that means is that if you are trying to understand what the next 4, 5, 10 years are going to bring, there are probably already some folks out there today that are already doing some very innovative things, but they may not be that visible. And there may not be that many of them, but they're out there. And so I think if you look around, my message based off this quote is that the third platform actually is already here. Right? So some people will say, this stuff is just starting, it's immature, I'm going to wait till it really comes of age. I want to show you just a few data points, and some of the data points will be hard to read, but I'll explain to you what it says. But basically, I'm going to go around this third platform, look at some of these technologies, and I'm going to show you that actually in 2012, in some cases, third platform technologies are actually already larger than the second platform technologies. They're already larger than the second platform. So if that doesn't convince you that it's already here and you need to do something, nothing will. So let's give some examples. So first example is around mobile broadband. So this is telecom services. So actually 2012 is the first year in which spending by enterprises on mobile broadband telecom services, data services, so this is the data side, is going to be larger than the spending on fixed data services. Now, this has been a slow train running. We've seen this for quite a few years coming from the horizon. It's not a shocking new development. We knew this crossover was going to happen, but we're here now. And so now as we go into the future, these things will never cross again. Your spending on mobile data is going to continue to be bigger and eventually much bigger than what you spend on fixed data services. If you go to the devices at the edge, so we've got in yellow the PCs, and in the red are smart mobile devices. So what we've done here is we've added smartphones and tablets. So really app devices that aren't PCs. And you can see that in 2012, this is the number of units shipped. The number of smart mobile devices shipped will be about twice the number of PCs shipped. Now, what's amazing about this is just last year, they were about even. Right? And now it's about double. So you can see what the growth rate is of all of these new types of devices. And last year, the folks who are very focused on PCs would say, yeah, Frank, well, the smart mobile devices is just about even and maybe starting to eclipse PC units, but we still make more money on the PCs because they're higher average selling price. That's no longer the case. 2012, more money will be spent. So it's not just units, but more money will be spent on smart mobile devices and PCs. And again, this is one of those where they'll never cross again. Okay, I'm not feeling sorry for the PC industry. It's still a very large industry, a very successful industry. But there's no question that if you're as a CIO, you have to look at this chart and say, well, mobile devices are now going to have to be my predominant or preeminent edge device that I'm going to have to accommodate, right? And then another area in data. Of course, one hallmark of the third platform is just an avalanche of data coming on, and much of it unstructured. In a way, I think of unstructured data as almost the poster child of the third platform. And you can see here that unstructured is in red, and actually this crossed over in 2011. The amount of enterprise data that's unstructured, so this is all video, voice, it is documents, text documents, and so forth, has exceeded, and it's going to continue to grow by leaps and bounds. And by the way, if you were to show consumer side, which is increasingly very important to all of us and relevant, it would be way ahead. It would be way ahead. And then the last thing that I want to show on this third platform is not about a technology, but it's about buyers of technology. And so emerging markets is a big piece of the story of the third platform. I think we'd all understand that the last two platforms, the companies that basically were the design point that the vendors focused on when they were coming up with new technologies was, what can we develop for the wealthiest, largest companies in the most developed economies? That was the number one thing. And then, if we're motivated, we'll see if we can somehow scale this down so some of the poor small and medium businesses can maybe take advantage of it, right? And so if you're in a small or medium-sized business, that hasn't really been a fun experience, right? This stuff that's built for other people and then often inappropriately scaled down and not very well to small and medium business. If you look at the next 20 years, emerging markets are already generating over half of the new growth in the IT market already. That started happening 2 years ago. So all of your favorite vendors, as they're thinking about their growth strategy, they're thinking about, well, what can I build that will sell in China? What can I build that will sell in India? What can I buy that I can sell in the Middle East and Africa or in Latin America? So these are design points that have much lower price tolerance and have very wide pyramids, actually much like New Zealand. Very broad pyramids so that, a relatively modest number of very large companies and then a lot of small and mid-sized companies. And so this is, I think, the good news here is that the industry growth is going to come from that small and medium size, and it's going to come from emerging markets. And so my example here is 2012 or second half of this year, China will actually eclipse Japan as the number 2 largest IT spending market in the world. And you can imagine that's not going to come back either. The next target for China is the US, right? So if you put all of this stuff together, what it basically says is, what I've done on this chart is add third platform technologies and second platform technologies and how much spending is done on each category from 2012 to 2020. And by the way, this is a Rorschach test for those of you in the audience here, because you can take a couple of different messages from this chart. The folks who see this Rorschach test and are not really excited about the third platform, they look at this and they say, well, that yellow, is still very large. And by the way, even when you get to 2020, it's almost 2/3 of the spending. So that settles it. I'm not going to have to spend much time focused on the third platform, right? I'm guessing probably not many of you are thinking that way in this room, right? Is that a fair guess? So the other way to look at this, of course, which I think is the appropriate way, is to say, well, look, it's about 20% of the spending. The third platform is about 20% of the spending now, and it's going to grow to a little bit over 1/3 by 2020. And very importantly, it's going to be growing at about 5 to 7 times the rate of all the other technology that we already have invested in. And it's going to account for over 70% of all the net new IT investment in enterprises around the world. Right? So if you look at this, what does this mean from a CIO standpoint? Also, take a look at those compound annual growth rate. 2.5% growth in your budget, right, to fund all that legacy. That's fun, isn't it? Go to the CFO each year, argue for refreshing all of the legacy systems and the legacy infrastructure. What's happening up in the red in the meantime? In the red, that is where the line of business executives are saying, well, I'm in retail. I want to somehow harness Facebook and mobile devices and the cloud, and I want to do next generation social mobile commerce to be able to reach many more customers and reach the right customers with the right offerings. Or it might be somebody in the health industry that says, well, we're going to launch thousands of new telemedicine services that allow us to deliver much higher quality service to many more people, including those in remote areas. Or it might be somebody who is in government that is saying, well, we have to be able to expand our services to the citizens, do a much better job of that, but at the same time we have to cut our budget by 2% a year. Right? So how are we going to do that? So you've got very motivated business executives in that red who are actually the ones who are probably leading the investment charge on that. So to me, this is going to be the interesting discussion and focus over the next several years is, if you were, again, just look at the size of the spending, you'd say, I'm not worrying about the red. I'm staying in the yellow. But if you want to be in the place where there's a lot of business enthusiasm, business executive enthusiasm to invest in third platform technologies that help grow the business and reach new customers and launch new offerings, you have to have a strategic focus on the red. All right, so hopefully I've convinced you that the urgency should be extreme for you to be thinking about, well, what are our strategies for developing the competencies we need in order to leverage the third platform technologies today, right? So please, the thing I actually don't want to hear are people saying, again, cloud is just hype, or we're going to wait a few years, or mobile devices, how can we put a cap on those when our employees come in with them? We have to have the opposite approach. We have to say, bring it on. Let's start experimenting. Let's start moving more systems into these new environments so we can learn about them and get very good at them. So let's talk about competencies. I mentioned the 3 areas of competency that I think will define the CIOs and the IT organizations that help their companies thrive in this third platform era. Let's just get out of the way before we go into those. One obvious area of competency that should be very high on your priority list in 2012 around this third platform, and that is competency in these technologies. So I was just mentioning that. So there's no question, and if you think about the agenda for this event, right, a lot of the vendors here, a lot of the discussion, a lot of the sessions we're going to hear over the next 2 years or next 2 days are going to be, what's happening in cloud? What type of workloads should I move to the cloud first? Should I do public cloud or private cloud? And what about mobile devices? Can I make the right strategic choice of which platforms we're going to support in our company? How do we manage them? If employees bring in their own device, how do we make sure that corporate data is secure on those? And again, big data, issues like sovereignty, on the one hand, that kind of hold it back a little bit, and then issues on the other end like, hey, if we can increase our analysis of our customer data from once a month or once every 2 weeks to half a dozen times a day, we can gain several points in market share. So starting to play with these technologies is going to be extremely important. So I'm not going to focus in my prepared comments on that. In Q&A, I'd be happy to talk a little bit, particularly around the cloud, about what we're seeing there. But I want to get off of the competencies. We'll hear more about that later, about the new technologies. I want to focus on these three competencies that really are less about the technology. They're more about how a CIO and an IT organization operate and how they think and where they put priorities in their agenda going forward. So let's talk about scale. Let me give you a little bit of an example. You know, when I was trying to think of an image that might be a little colorful to address this scale issue, I was thinking, well, it reminded me of a scene out of a movie. Do you remember Austin Powers? Did anyone see that movie, Austin Powers? And do you remember there's a Dr. Evil who's the bad guy? He was frozen or put in suspended animation in the 1960s. And then he's woken up in, what is it, the 90s or early 2000s, so quite a few years, decades later. And this particular scene always cracks me up. He's stolen a terrible device, a nuclear device, and he's assembled the world's leaders over some video phone, and he's saying how he's going to hold them hostage. And if we can see the video, let's watch this.
Gentlemen, my name is Dr. Evil. In a little while, you'll notice that the Kreplaka study warhead has gone missing. If you want it back, you're going to have to pay me $1 million. Sorry. $100 billion.
Gentlemen, silence.
Yeah, so you get the idea. He's got a little problem with the scale of the day, right? And so when I think about, IT organizations looking at this third platform, get ready, because we're going to have some Dr. Evil moments of our own, where we start looking at the scale of things in our own IT environment, and we're going to shake our heads and wonder, how did this happen? We're 10x, 100x, 1,000x in some areas, or in some areas the speed has shrunk by a factor of, it's 1/10 or 1/100th of the time we used to have to do things. So I want to show a couple of examples that are affecting, IT organizations, but also vendors too. And probably the most dramatic scale jump we've seen already from this third platform is in the area of mobile apps. So probably we can all relate to this. And if you think about mobile app downloads, I'm showing you IDC's latest forecast on this. And of course, this does include stuff like Angry Birds and all the rest of that stuff, but there are corporate and enterprise-oriented mobile apps in there as well. But the interesting thing about mobile apps is, if you look on the left, that's 2011. This is the number of apps that were downloaded in 2011. And you can see about 26 billion apps downloaded in 2011. And the other interesting thing is 80% of them were free. Right, so what kind of business is that? Okay, so all the software vendors are shaking their heads now saying, this is crazy, right? But about 4 billion were paid for. And that's about, by the way, the same number of PC applications that were bought in 2011, 4 billion. Now, and you can see the growth rate here. By 2016, we're going to see, what's the factor there? That's almost a six-fold growth in the number of downloads. So incredible. This is like the smart mobile devices. It's like the mobile apps. It's like the unstructured data. Just mobile app growth is just going through the roof. And you can imagine by 2016, I don't have the data with me right here, but if there were 4 billion PC software sales in 2011, by 2016, what will that be? 5 billion? It's not a very rapid growth. So again, mobile apps totally shooting past PC apps. Now, here's the interesting thing. Number one, as an IT shop, you're going to have to deal with that, right? So if you think right now, all of the mobile devices that your employees use that are used more often than you probably think for enterprise use, what's going to be on those? If you think there's a lot of stuff you don't know about now, just wait. Just wait 4 years. It's going to grow to much higher levels. So there's going to be a scale of diversity in the app portfolio that touches your world it's hard to fathom. Right? Now, the other side of this is cost. This really shakes the vendors up. If you take a look at the amount of spending on those mobile apps, I'm going to circle the average price per app. Look at that price point. But $1.59 per mobile app. Those are the paid ones. And that's going down to under a US dollar by the time you get to 2016. By the way, point of comparison, the average PC app costs about 25 US dollars, which may shock those of you who buy, Office and those kind of things. They cost a little bit more than $25, but there's a long tail of PC apps, and the whole average is about 25. So you can see it's 1/10 the price. So 10x or more, over time, the volume, 1/10 the price. It's a crazy world, okay? The whole software ecosystem around the end devices that your organizations are going to be managing are totally changing. Now, the good news for you is this isn't just happening with mobile apps. Through the cloud, it's happening with enterprise software. So anyone who's looked at the pricing per seat for an email box for an employee, we've already started to see the price pressure coming way down. Where the all-in subscription cost, say about it's coming down below $10, and in some cases $5, $3, and again, going lower in terms of a SaaS email environment. And then compared to an all-in cost per employee of what, $40, $50, $70? So you can see it's happening on the enterprise software side. So that's a good side for you. So the complexity is going up, volumes are going up, but pricing is coming down. Let me give you another dimension of this scale jump in our industry that will affect you. So I had an interesting discussion back in 2003 with Henning Kagerman, who was the CEO of SAP at the time. And he made a very bold statement at that time. So SAP was heavily concentrated in the larger accounts, had about 20,000 corporate customers, 20,000 enterprises. And he said, that by the time we get out to 2010, we're going to grow that fivefold. We're going to have over 100,000 customer accounts, which is a heck of a major change. I mean, that is a disruptive change. And actually, SAP's done a fantastic job. They're up over 165,000 customers now. Can you believe that? I mean, that is a phenomenal growth. And of course, this makes sense because if you're seeing the price points come down on software, if you want to stay in business, you better dramatically get more customers in. Otherwise, you're going to go into the abyss. So this is part of the world, and you have to move farther down into small and medium business. Now, while I've complimented Henning and SAP, I just want to show you, again, another Dr. Evil moment. Last November, Eric Schmidt, who is the former chairman of Google, he was interviewed, and he said that, Google, they're adding 5,000 new firms a day. 5,000 new firms a day. Right? So just to contrast that, for SAP, at this very rapid clip, by the way, one of the fastest account growths among traditional vendors we've seen, they'd have to work at that for 4 months to get 5,000 new customers. 4 months, 1 day. And by the way, we all know Google's firms, who SAP is bringing are not all the same type of companies, right? So SAP is operating a little higher. But to me, it's this volume and pace of new customer addition that's going to really drive what this third platform world looks like. So again, the volume of customers, and again, this from your perspective, who are these companies coming in? They could be partners. They could be distribution partners. They could be innovation, development partners on the back end of your supply chain. This opportunity to dramatically expand the type of companies you do business with and that help magnify the growth and value of your own enterprise. So this is going to be part of what you'll be dealing with, through your own organization and probably through a platform play is how do we make sure that we are reaching out and doing business not just with our old partners, but with many, many more, orders of magnitude more other players in our industry. The last thing I want to show you is around scale, is around another metric, and that's really about time, the compression of time that comes with this increase in volume. So 2 weeks ago at the Cloud Leadership Forum, we had Jerry Hunter speak, who's the VP of IT of infrastructure at Amazon.com. So he's the guy that runs, the 500,000 blade servers, that are in their data centers, and that's, of course, a legendary story. And I'm very interested to hear Tim Campos with Facebook. They obviously have a very huge data center as well. But Jerry talked about what is his strategy as a CIO, effectively, at Amazon.com to leverage the scale, right? So they've got a massive scale of compute power at very low cost, basically a cloud architecture. And how are they leveraging that for competitive advantage for Amazon? And he used this example. He said, look, I can beat 90% of you at chess if for every move you make, I get to make 2. Right? And that basically is the philosophy, that they've compressed their cost per user for IT down so low that they can iterate and iterate and iterate and innovate repeatedly at very low cost, because effectively what they've done is they've lowered their cost for mistakes. So they've dramatically lowered their per unit cost, they've accelerated their deployment speed, and that enables them to try lots of new things a lot faster. Now, to give you a sense of scale, he showed this data. This will make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. He talked about when they make changes in their server, software changes across their server farm, just how many they do and how quickly they do them. So check these out. So this is just from May. Mean time between deployments, so deployment is basically a software change out to a server, 11.6 seconds, right? They do a maximum number of over 1,000 deployments in a single hour. 10,000, that's the mean number of hosts simultaneously receiving a deployment. So at any point in time, their average number of hosts receiving a deployment is 10,000. And then the max is 30,000. I mean, that is just a time scale that is just off the charts. But I would argue that this is the world of scale, the new scale. The amount of devices, amount of users, the amount of partners you do business with, the cost of the technology you use, the cost of the technology you deliver, the speed at which you deliver it, all giving what benefit? The ability to iterate business innovation much faster at much higher volume so that your chances of discovering something that will deliver new value to your company is much higher. So this is what he said. He said at Amazon, our strategy is iteration, not inspiration. We're not waiting for the great new idea and we're going to try one every week or two. We're trying thousands of them each day. And so to me, that is the scale that is going to be one that separates who among you leverage this third platform to deliver your own companies this advantage of fast innovation and very low-cost failure that enables that innovation. All right. Second area of competency to me is community. And this is a pretty simple idea. And as I thought about, well, what's a good sort of clip that would talk about what this difference is for CIOs in the third platform, I thought about that show Lost. Have you heard of Lost? Probably most of you have heard of Lost. And many of you perhaps have watched it. But the idea is these guys, they crash on a deserted island. God knows where it is. They don't know where it is. And so very early, about a week in, all of these survivors start bickering with each other. And so this one character, Dr. Jack Shepard, he's the hero of the show. He just at one point loses it, and he starts giving a big lecture, and he basically talks about, hey, we've got to work together. That's the only way we're going to make it. So let's see this video clip.
We can't do this. Every man for himself is not going to work. It's time to start organizing. We need to figure out how we're going to survive here. If we can't live together, we're going to die alone.
That's it. If you're a Lost person, that is the one line that everyone thinks of when they think of Lost. If we can't live together, we're going to die alone. I mean, that's heavy, isn't it? That is heavy. And yet, I think when we think about the third platform from a business model standpoint, not only the technology layer, so technology ecosystems and platforms, but also the business ecosystems and platforms that will sit on top of those, that's going to be a huge differentiator between the winners and losers as we go forward. We've talked about platforms for decades. But with cloud platforms and platform as a service and mobile device platforms, this is really the first time we have real platforms where a lot of innovators don't have to do a lot of reinvention of the lower part of the technology stack. There are companies out there that are in business delivering it. So you're just focused on delivering that increment of new innovation that you're an expert on. And because of that platform model, it's going to open the door for millions and millions of new and small innovators to come to market in a way they never could have before. So there are just a couple of points on this community story and what it means for you. So basically there are two platform battles around which communities are going to aggregate in the technology business over the next several years. One battle is almost over, which is at the edge, right? So the mobile device. So I know this is hard to read, but you'll get the idea when I describe it to you. This was a survey we made of mobile app developers, and we asked them, when you look at all the different mobile, iOS and Android and RIM's platforms and Microsoft's platforms and so forth, which of these are you very interested in developing for? And I'll just read through. You can see there really are two groupings. Up at the top, there's iPhone, iPad, Android phone, Android tablet, and interestingly enough, HTML5 web. So sort of a more open, if you will, mobile platform. And then there's a drop, and then Microsoft comes in, and then RIM below it, and so forth. And so what we see here is, to me, this battle, which is very strategic, is going to be, it's almost at its climax. The only difference we're going to see in the next 12 months, Microsoft is going to be working very hard to convince developers that they are for real in a mobile device environment. And obviously the new tablets they came out with last week, they look pretty good, by the way, are going to be a major effort to get them to jump up to this upper level. So that's the only question left in my mind is, will Microsoft successfully in the next 12 months become one of the key platforms on the edge for the next 10 and 15 years. And so from a CIO standpoint, the key thing here is we don't want to pick the losers, right? So, it's very clear if I want to pick the winners, I'm going to put most effort on the ones that are getting the most developer support. So again, that's a key message. The vendors are only as strong as the developer ecosystems they're able to attract. So platforms aren't declared by the vendors, right? They are crowned by the number of developers who support those platforms. So the more interesting and the much earlier stage mega platform battle right now is in the cloud. So it's the platform as a service. And we've got a lot of companies vying for that. We surveyed enterprise developers in this case, and we asked them how likely is it that you would either develop on these public platforms as a service and or source software or services from these platforms. And you can see this is a horse race. We asked them to rate it 1 to 5, 1 absolutely no way we would use these, 5 absolutely we're going to use them. And you can see that they're all clustered around the 3. So you can see Google's at the top, but not by much. You've got Azure, IBM, VMware, Oracle, a lot of the companies that are here, Salesforce, Amazon, Red Hat, and so forth. So there's a minuscule gap between the top and the bottom on this chart. So this battle is open. It's a horse race right now. So, but to me, this is going to be a critical decision for CIOs to make in the next couple of years, is to try to watch this closely because, in the past, your lock-in or your affiliation was, and your success was tied to, well, am I an SAP shop or an Oracle shop or I'm a Microsoft shop or an IBM shop? And now the decision you're about to make for the next 20 years is, whose platform am I going to associate myself with? Because you're going to be going to those platforms to source the next generation of enterprise apps, many of which will be SaaS, and you're going to develop new IP on top of these platforms as a way to distribute your own company's value into the marketplace. So to me, this is an area that, PaaS is kind of sometimes makes people's eyes glaze over because it's what exactly is a platform as a service? To me, this is the new developer environment in which you're going to create new value for your company. And you're, by the way, going to, as we'll see in a minute, you're going to wind up creating your own developer community around yourselves. If you think about it, that's what Google did, that's what eBay did, that's what Amazon did, Facebook has done. Your own companies are going to wind up having your own platform on top of one or more of these mega platforms, and you're going to create value in your industry on top of it. So an important area. The last of the competencies I just want to mention is context. And I have Steve Jobs up here because I think Apple and Steve Jobs, they probably the hallmark for their success in kind of their second birth, really, with the iPhone and the iPod and the iPad and so forth and the iTunes Store, has been around this ability to see the context of value for consumers. And that it's not just about this device or that content, but it's about the linkage of things together. And one of Steve Jobs' favorite folks in terms of the world of design was a designer, Eero Saarinen, a Finnish designer, who had a great quote. He said, "Always design a thing by considering it in its next larger context. A chair in a room in a house in a neighborhood, an environment or a neighborhood in a city plan." So you get the idea. Keep looking, what's the outside-in view that will give me the ability to understand the value people are looking for? And so what this means from a CIO standpoint, and from the vendors as well here, is really, if you think about that third platform, you've got the core technologies down the bottom, but you've also got lots of different user communities on the left. You've got a lot of apps and services and information and content experiences on the right. You've got really mashups of these technologies that are about creating high-value solutions that are very industry-specific, and we'll see lots of them created over this next several years and the next decades to come. And the whole secret is, can they as vendors and can you as CIOs see, well, where is the highest layer of value that I need to design my organization around, and then connect the dots back to the other pieces that I need to have. So if you think about some folks who've connected across the value chain, Apple obviously with devices, with its iTunes Store and all the content deals, said, hey, in order to make my device more valuable, I have to connect to the content. And of course, Amazon last year did the opposite. They said, well, we've got a heck of a lot of content. We're going to create the Kindle as a great new device. It's a front door to get access and add value to our content. And then all the telcos in the world are basically saying, well, we've got these great networks. How can we create new consumer and business services around it, cloud services that draw more value from our networks? And IBM, Accenture, other companies have done, Infosys, others have said, let's take these core technologies and let's start assembling them into next generation, crime fighting systems or health diagnosis systems or, entertainment delivery systems. So things that are much more about, they're not email systems or CRM or ERP. They're about new ways of doing business within an industry. And so, as I think about it from a CIO standpoint, your context increasingly is going to be up at this level of, can I be working with the CMO? Can I be working with the supply chain VP? Can I be working with product development and design? Can I be working with our sales and distribution organization to create interesting new things that leverage those technologies that now we've become masters of, social and mobile, big data and cloud, and deliver these systems that generate new value for our company? So to me, we've talked about this for decades, but the platform for us, I think, is going to give us the opportunity to not spend 80% of our time keeping the lights on and micromanaging the infrastructure, but actually leverage a lot of that cost out through automation and technology, or maybe through third-party service procurement, so that we can actually turn up the percentage of time we're spending up at that intelligent industry solution level and high-value level. So these are just a few examples of some of the solutions we're already seeing industry as well as CIOs start to put together by doing mashups of these third platform technologies. And you can see, as I said, they're not CRM, they're not HR, they're not ERP. They're really up almost at a business process and an industry transformation level. And CIOs, we've started doing an accounting of all of these new solutions, intelligent industry solutions. We've targeted about 40, a little over 40 of them already, and we're forecasting how much spending budget is going into CIOs building and procuring these new solutions. And you can see it's going to be over $200 billion in just a few years. So this is a very big part of, if you think about that red, remember I said the 15% growth rate in the third platform, and it was going to be 70+% of the net new spending in your budget. It's going into things like building these or procuring these. All right, the last thing I want to talk about before we go into Q&A is just talk about, well, who are the players in this next wave, both on the vendor side and then around you and your industry. And I think there's some interesting insights here. When I was thinking about when a new platform comes and what understanding the competition, where it's coming from, who are they? I thought immediately of a movie, this is going to date me, but Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I don't know if you remember, but one scene in the movie, Robert Redford and Paul Newman, they are robbing a train. And this is unfortunately for them like the 10th or 12th train they've robbed, and the railroad is onto them. Right? So they've stacked a load of marshals, a big posse, inside one of the cars, and they burst out of the car and start chasing, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And they are chasing them on and on and on over days and days. And, of course, the big line is, who are these guys? Who the heck are these guys? So let's run the clip.
I couldn't do that. Could you do that? How can they do that? Who are those guys? Who are those guys? Who are those guys? Jesus, who are those guys?
Exactly. Who are those guys? And I think for a lot of us, we're going to be wondering, who are those guys that are going to be leading? Now, on the one side, they're going to be new suppliers to us in this third platform era. And on the other side, there are going to be other companies that compete with our own company that leverage the third platform technologies. Paul Newman, that first clip, he said, how can they do that? We can't do that. How can they do that? And I think that's what a lot of us are going to be thinking as we look at other companies in our industry. And they're going to be doing it because they're better at leveraging these third platform technologies perhaps than we are. So let's think about the vendors for a second. There's no question. I think of 4 groups. Number one, I'm going to cover that quickly because every vendor in this room is wondering if their logo's up there, okay? So, but these are the incumbents, right? So the folks who've become leaders over the past 25 years or more in delivering solutions and technology to us. And so for them, what they bring, of course, is they bring relationships with you. They bring deep technical expertise. They understand their markets well. They have a lot of financial resources. They have market share. So a lot of assets. But of course, there's the crossroads. Are they ready to do new things in new ways that may be unnatural for them and maybe cannibalizes their traditional, position? So that's the challenge there. Then, of course, there's the kind of new, kind of born on the cloud guys, including some who are reborn. So I'd put Apple as kind of one of those reborn companies. And they are the upstarts, right? So they have more of a clean sheet of paper. And the advantage they bring is they understand scale. And they understand the cloud. And they are all about mobility. And they bring lots of knowledge about social technologies. And they don't have a lot of risk about cannibalizing the old model. They are just full guns a-blazing going after the new model and new opportunities. But I think scale is probably the number one thing that they understand. And for many of them, they understand context. Certainly Apple's a good example of that. Now, these are a group of companies. Remember I talked about how important emerging markets are? They're driving over 50% of the new spending in IT already, and that'll be growing up to over 60% within the next 5 years. These guys are, by the way, this is that Cyrillic guy sort of in the middle at the top, that's Yandex, which is basically the Google of Russia. But you can see within these markets, whether it's Russia, whether it's China, whether it's India, Brazil, you name it, these guys have, number one, they know how to make money with very low price points. Right, so you think about what companies like Bharti or others that are operating in a mobile carrier in India, they're operating on average revenue per user that are just absolutely infinitesimally small because they have to. You think about a company like ZTE that is, a device manufacturer out of China is probably Apple's worst nightmare because they're saying, hey, something that Apple sells for $4.99 or $5.99, a brand new generation iPhone in Western Europe and in the US, we're going to make one that has an average price that's $99 or $100 because we're going to sell it to the billions of emerging middle class in China, right? And it may be not quite as functional as an iPhone, but it's going to be 70 or 80%, and it'll be good enough, and it's a fraction of the cost. So, what these guys bring is they bring a scale of a target market. They bring certain, definitely awareness and competence around low price points necessary to succeed. And of course, they bring the context of these local environments, which is very important. Now, what's the fourth group? This is a group that you really would say, who are these guys? Right? So these are what I'd call, business as a service companies. Right? So they're, let me blow it up a little bit just to give you an example here, or to talk about them a little bit more. Right? So Metascale, that is a company that was created by Sears Holdings. So Sears, that's the retailer in the U.S. They created an internal technology group that uses cloud and big data analytics to be able to, and Hadoop, to generate a lot of deep analytics at a very rapid rate so they can understand all their retail and supply chain data, so they can make better decisions faster for all of their different stores. And they decided to, they spent so much money doing it, they said, let's actually build a company around it, and we're going to sell these services to other retailers, and we're going to sell it to other industries. And what's interesting is, if you take a look at Phil Shelley, who is the CTO of Sears, and he's the CEO of this new company within a company, he said that the expectation within Sears, of course, is in retail, very low margin business. They expect this IT business to be the highest margin business within Sears and the highest growth. That's why they're doing it. We asked, well, why would you sell this competency to competitors? He said, because it's a good business, and it's a big business, and it's going to be our highest growth and most profitable business. So, that's a different way of seeing IT within a company. Some of the other folks here, if you go back, Peak Healthcare, that's Johns Hopkins Hospital, big hospital center, healthcare center in the U.S. They invested in building a medical imaging cloud, because we know those are incredibly expensive. Medical imaging take a lot of storage. And so what they did is they partnered with another company, and they created Peak Healthcare Innovations. And that is a company that is selling, guess what? Medical imaging cloud services to other healthcare providers. And then, of course, let's go back past Metascale. We're lucky enough tomorrow, I think. Is it right? Tomorrow, Steve, you speaking? Yes, Steve Rubinow, who's with FX Alliance and formerly with New York Stock Exchange. He was actually at the Cloud Leadership Forum a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about the transformation that technology's created within his former company. The New York Stock Exchange used to consider themselves a stock exchange that uses technology really well. But now they've built something called the trading community platform, where they basically have a SaaS service, a community service, where they host lots of new solutions for the financial services and trading community. So they've created a platform as a service, but it's not like Azure or Force.com or those things. It's actually all about financial services innovation. And so he said now New York Stock Exchange sees itself as a technology company that happens to run exchanges. So you get the idea that this business as a service category, which will probably be much larger than infrastructure as a service or platform as a service or the traditional IT software as a service, is about all of your industries delivering services on platforms to your industries, to your customers. If you think about it, cloud services as we know them today is just the IT industry using the cloud to reach the market. Business as a service is about all of your industries, mastering this cloud technology, mastering mobile technologies and social to dramatically expand your market reach, to dramatically lower your cost, and to enlist thousands and thousands of partners who are going to amplify your value of your offerings. And so to me, I think this is the kind of the strategic conclusion of where the third platform is going to lead us. It's not about renovating IT and making IT operations kind of more efficient and faster and lower cost. It is all about now step it up into the business executives who run the company, and how can you be working with them to build your own company into the next leading cloud service provider within your own industry. So, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. If I think about really the next 2 days and really the rest of this year as a staging point for success for the next 10, 15, 20 years around this third platform transition. I think that is where we are. It's a once every 20 or 25 year opportunity that we have in our hands. It is challenging, but it's tremendously exciting. And I think the success is going to come from, of course, first recognizing that this is a new platform, that it's there. It's not just random technologies that have shown up, but these things are related to each other. And our ability to harness those technologies and be really good at them is going to be the key to not just IT success in your company, but your whole company. And that the other competencies beyond the technical ones are all about really business mindset and business rules and operations around scale. You know, can you get to a high-scale IT service delivery environment that's a scale well beyond anything you've ever delivered or dealt with? That you are extremely good at community, not just leveraging the communities that are about technology communities, right? It's not about the open source technologies necessarily. It's about, can you use those technologies and build your own community of innovation around your own company? And of course, that you're stepping out of the boiler room as much as you possibly can and up into that executive suite, that the conversation you're having about technology is really a Steve Jobs outside in kind of conversation. It's about business innovation and competitive advantage, and then drawing down into, well, how do we deliver it? How do we do that successfully? And of course, as I said, competition, not only understanding who the new players will be that will be trying to satisfy you from IT vendor community, but that you yourself are going to be a cloud and mobile services and big data services provider, and to get yourself ready to be a damn good one. So you might have noticed I used this image before, a marathon, and I think it's very appropriate for us in 2012. This is why I talk about 2012 when we think and 2020 together. Because if you've ever watched a marathon, you probably noticed that very early in the race, whether it's 5 miles in, 7 miles in, you start seeing a lead pack forming. And there's no guarantee that any one of those runners in that lead pack is going to win. But there's an incredibly high likelihood that the winner will be among those lead pack players. And if you are not in that lead pack at the 5 mile point or the 7 mile point, you have almost no hope of being the winner at the finish line, right? You don't wait till mile 25 or mile 24 to make the move. You're already staging it early. And so to me, this is very much where we are as CIOs today. We're at mile 5, we're at mile 7, in this race to establish leadership in our industry by the time we get to 2020, and that this is the time to make those moves. The last thing I'll say about this picture, you might notice there's a leg sticking out on that left side of the picture. Have you noticed that? Right? So that's somebody who's not in the lead pack, but is really close and is making a big move. And the other guys don't even see him or her. And so to me, you may not necessarily see yourself as a lead pack player. But you know what? I think this is the kind of time and opportunity in our industry and in your industry where you can come from behind, blow right by that lead pack, and they'll never know what hit them.